everyone. Welcome to Tell Me What You Don't Like About Yourself, the Nip Tuck Rewatch podcast, where we're looking back at the Rosetta Stone of the Ryan Murphy universe through a rainbow lens with 20 years of hindsight. I'm your host, Amanda, and I really don't even know where to begin with this one. When I first started thinking seriously about actually making this podcast, it, unfortunately, wasn't because Nip Tuck was having some sort of critical renaissance or cultural reappraisal. And it certainly wasn't because anyone asked me for it. It was just, this show has stayed with me for a very long time, and Julian McMahon's performance is a huge part of that. I never quite knew how we were meant to feel about Christian Troy. I think most of us were probably incredibly sympathetic, but some of the choices the writers made always made me wonder if that was actually the intention. I wanted to dig deep into those nuances, the contradictions, that make the characters so compelling. I couldn't have imagined that, just 4 episodes in, how we look at the show would shift in such a fundamental way. I'm not even entirely sure how to talk about it right now, but I'm hoping that we can figure it out together. And on a related note, I'm still working on the first episode of the miniseries highlighting some of my favorite, and I'm sure yours too, Julian McMahon performances. And I hope to share that with you soon. I may have gotten a little sidetracked rewatching way more episodes of Charmed than I originally intended to. But right now, let's talk Nip Tuck. This week's episode is Kurt Dempsey. It was written by Lynn Green and Richard Levine, directed by Elodie Keene, and originally aired on August 19th, 2003. We open in McNamara, Troy, and our patient of the week is Kurt Dempsey. Just right off the bat, anyone who's watched this episode knows that it's going to be a tricky one to talk about because Kurt is a white man who wants plastic surgery so his eyes look like his Japanese fiancé's. I was kind of dreading talking about this one, but I will say that, though just to be clear, it is very bad. The storyline wraps up in a way that makes it maybe not quite as bad as it otherwise could be, but we're not there yet. Anyway, Kurt's fiancée Lee has very traditional parents. She refers to her mother as xenophobic, which seems unfair when we learn that her mother was born in a Japanese American internment camp and that her family lost everything. Lee continues that her mother has always disapproved of any man she went out with who wasn't Japanese, and she just can't take the chance this time, not when she's found the one. Christian suggests that if he is the one, why don't they just elope and then she can introduce Kurt to her mother after? That's a lot more reasonable than asking your fiancé to rearrange their face. Lee explains that the last man she was serious about was also white, and her mother said that if Lee married him, she'd never see her again. Lee wants any future children she might have to know her family. Kurt doesn't want Lee to make that kind of sacrifice when he can prevent it by having this operation. Sean, quite rightly, points out that it's not quite that simple, and there's no guarantee that the surgery will even convince Lee's mother that he's Japanese. Sean says that he'd pay for Kurt to put himself through the pain and trauma of an operation, only to have it not come out the way he'd like it to. At this point, Christian pipes up that due to the uncommon nature of the procedure, there would be some additional expense. Sean shoots Christian a little exasperated side-eye at that, and suggests that Kurt take some time to think about it. Kurt insists his mind is made up, and asks, haven't you ever loved someone so much that you're willing to do anything to keep from losing them? Just in case we're not picking up the subtext that the show is putting down, Sean casts his eyes over to the framed photo of Julia on his desk. There's also a photo of Matt, and they do that classic TV show thing of using what is clearly a promo photo. I know for sure it's a promo photo because back in the day, I made a little homemade bookmark using that photo and a screen cap of Seth Gable as Adrian. So that's a little peek into what I was doing back in 2004. Anyway, we've moved over to Casa McNamara, and Julia's just trying to get a few minutes alone to pee. We then see that she's taking a pregnancy test, and given her deep sigh and the fact that she keeps repeating the word shit, we can guess that the results were not what she was hoping for. Roll opening credits. Post-credits, we are with Christian and two of his pals, Victor and Serge, who we have never met before and will never meet again. They're in a nightclub and just generally being gross about women. We learn that Victor is engaged, but Christian claims that monogamy doesn't actually go into effect until the wedding. Christian also asks, ever notice how monogamy rhymes with monotony? Victor feels sorry for Christian. Obviously, he's never been in love. Christian replies, of course I have. It's that beautiful moment between meeting the woman of your dreams and seeing her stretch marks. Not cool, Christian. There's some more sleazy back and forth, and then Christian's off to buy a woman a drink. Victor asks, "Don't you ever get tired of it? The whole, who am I going to lay tonight scene?" Christian, sarcastically, is like, "Yes, I get absolutely exhausted." Next up, we're with Julia, who seems to finally be getting into the swing of things at school. Just as a little note, they're currently studying genetics. Jude jokes that he knows who he'll be sitting next to during the MCATs, and then, quite flirtily, invites her to lunch. Julia tries to let him down easy and tells Jude he'd only be wasting his time. She's probably not even going to medical school. Jude asks what she's going to do with all that beauty and brains. Julia's reply, "I don't know. Pass them on to my offspring?" We hop back over to McNamara Troy, where Sean and Christian are preparing to remove a very elaborate tattoo that covers the whole of a man's back, after the woman in his life left him for someone else. Christian asks what could possibly make someone get a tattoo like that. Sean says love, and Christian makes an incredulous face that is deeply delightful. Sean continues that he was obviously deeply in love with Toyota. It's very funny when Christian then checks the tattoo and corrects Sean that it's Latoya. The butt crack's tough to read. Undeterred, Sean insists it's a sign of commitment, but Christian remains unconvinced. He points out that Sean and Julia love each other, but Christian doesn't see them branding each other's names all over their butts. But then again, Christian adds, "I haven't showered with either of you since college." And that's a story that we need to hear sometime. Sean says he and Julia actually discussed it before they got married, but Julia thought he was crazy. Sean would have done it. This prompts Liz to talk about her own tattoo, two female symbols intertwined to express her lesbian identity, when Grace pokes her head in and says she has a couple who've been waiting for an hour. Sean tries to send Christian. Christian, very obviously not wanting to work with Grace, tries to send Sean. Sean and Christian are totally doing these two people have known each other forever and are having a full conversation with just their eyes, until Sean insists that Christian go, because things are never going to improve with Grace if he doesn't work on them. Sean says Christian's not even trying, to which Christian replies, "Believe me, if I wasn't trying, she'd be dead by now," and then heads off to the consult. Said consult is for Ellie Collins, aka Gabrielle Carteris, aka Andrea Zuckerman herself. Ellie, with a bruised and bandaged nose, is accompanied by her husband. She explains to Christian that she was in a terrible car accident. Somehow only her nose was injured. Make a note of this for later. And she's hoping he can repair the damage. Also, while he's working, maybe he could do something to make it a little bit cuter? Her husband's all, "Your nose couldn't be any cuter." We're meant to take away that they're a very loved up couple. Christian's assessing Ellie's nose when Grace starts asking questions about the car accident. Christian, aggressively sweetly, says to Grace that he assumed she asked these questions while they were waiting for him. Christian turns his attention back to Ellie and tells her that he'll discuss her case with his partner, and then they'll book her in for surgery. Christian and Grace walk Ellie and her husband out to the waiting room, and when they're gone, Christian asks Grace to please begin patient consultations in her office, and when she's through, stay there. Christian, during the scene, starts oogling the sexy lady who comes in to take care of the plants. Grace gives him a great side eye, our second of the episode, and then gets in a little dig that it's a shame turtlenecks aren't in style anymore, causing Christian to try and tug up his collar to hide the hickey that I guess he got from the lady in the bar. Grace leaves, and let's just say that Christian loves to watch her go. Following this, we're back at the McNamara family home. Julie's cooking dinner, and Sean notices a vase of dead flowers on the table when he walks in the door. He tries to do a funny little, "Hi honey, these are for you" bit, then has to explain that was a joke. Julia reluctantly plays along with, "Thank you, they're lovely. You shouldn't have gone to the trouble." Julia's exuding "I am not in a good mood" energy, and Sean offers to help by setting the table. Sean's clearing the table and notices that Julia got an A on her test. She testily corrects him that she got an A-. Sean's still impressed. God bless Sean, he's really trying here. Sean, making conversation, asks if this was the teacher Julia knew in college. Julia immediately thinks Sean's assuming that the teacher showed favoritism. Poor Sean's still trying to save this incredibly awkward interaction by insisting that Julia's always been a great student. Better than him. Julia dismissively says that was a long time ago. Sean replies that she's obviously still got potential. You know what potential is, Sean? Nothing. Just wishful thinking. A possibility that doesn't exist unless it's fulfilled. Julia is not in a great place here. Sean and Julia share a philosophical back and forth about the acorn and the tree. Julia is still an acorn. Sean became the tree. Sean reassures her that if she wants to go to med school, they'll make it happen. She has his full support, financially, emotionally, whatever it takes. Julia blurts out that she's pregnant. Matt, with terrible timing, strolls into the kitchen and asks what's for dinner. Noting the dead flower smell, Matt asks, "Did something die in here or what?" The answer, of course, is yes, Sean and Julia's marriage. From there, we're back at McNamara Troy as Sean, Christian, and Liz are preparing for Kurt Dempsey's surgery. Christian makes a racist joke. I won't repeat it, but it involves Charlie Brown and Pokemon. Liz, finally being the voice of reason that this episode needs, wants to know if anyone else besides her thinks there's anything morally reprehensible about a white man trying to pass himself off as a victim of the American racial hierarchy. Go Liz. Christian's response is kind of funny. "Sean, tell her to quit using all those big words around me." Sean's view is that their job is to alleviate pain. Liz is like, "That's your answer? So why don't we just turn everyone white and hetero?" Christian's eyebrows shoot up at that. Sean explains that they can change the obstacle that separates this guy from the one thing he wants in life, and he sees nothing wrong with that. Christian asks Liz if she shaves under her arms. Is she trying to pass as straight? An annoyed Liz tells Christian that he's so close to a harassment suit, and then heads into the OR. A pissy Sean asks Christian to at least try and act professionally for a change. Christian's trying to figure out what's got Sean all grumpy. Sean tells Christian that Julia is pregnant, which prompts a congratulations from Christian until Sean ducks his head and Christian's like, "Or should I not say congratulations?" Sean doesn't know. Christian asks if Julia is excited. Sean explains that it's complicated. Julia's been taking pre-med courses, and this was supposed to be her time to do her thing. That was the plan. Christian takes that to mean that Julia is ambivalent. Sean admits the timing has never really been his strong suit, like when Julia got pregnant with Matt. Sean tells Christian that what he said back then really helped, and now Sean can't imagine his life without Matt. Christian responds that he only told Sean what he wanted to hear. Sean asks Christian to do it again. Christian clarifies, "You mean talk you out of pushing Julia to have an abortion?" He's not sure he can. They were different people back then. They were young, in love. Sean cuts in that they're still in love. Their conversation continues in the OR. Christian tells Sean that if his gut is telling him something's not right, maybe it isn't. Sean counters, "Or maybe it is. Maybe it'll give us something good to focus on." Christian replies, "Don't take this the wrong way, but you haven't exactly been super dad." Ouch. Surprisingly, instead of getting upset, Sean says that he'll do better this time. People change. Christian's not so sure. Faces change. Asses and thighs. But people? Come on, Sean. You really think this guy's going to be any more Japanese because we make him look Asian? No one changes. We are who we are. Then it's surgery montage of the week time. Kurt's surgery is set to Love Fool by the Cardigans, an absolute classic, and I will not entertain any other opinions on this. I will say that I let out what I'm pretty sure was an audible sigh of relief when Love Fool started up. I couldn't remember which song was used, and I was so worried that it was going to be turning Japanese. Thankfully, it is not. Love Fool is still playing on the soundtrack as we jump to a little bit later and Grace making her way into Christian's office, where she interrupts him having very vigorous desk sex with Sexy Plant Lady. There's a quite funny cut to Grace reading Arrested Development in the adult male while chilling with a cup of coffee. It turns out to be the last cup of coffee, and Christian lets her know that it's considered a courtesy for the person who finishes the pot to make more. Fully with Christian on that one. That's an asshole move on Grace's part. Grace is like, "I just assumed you have a coffee girl who provided you with that service." They banter a bit about Sexy Plant Lady, real name Jasmine. Grace thinks Christian's flaunting this adolescent behavior because a girl has invaded his boys' club. Grace is calling something up on her phone and tells Christian that she hopes he takes this in the spirit in which it's intended. Christian's like, I can already tell you, without going any further, that sentence is a mistake. Grace gives Christian the address and the time of a Sexaholics Anonymous meeting. As a professional, Grace thinks he has a problem. Christian scoffs at the idea that too much sex is a problem. Sean gets home from work and Julia is typing away on her laptop. Sean pauses and then tells Julia that he's been giving it a lot of thought and he thinks they should have the baby. Julia's been thinking too. She likes being back at school. When's she going to take the MCATs? When she's 50? Sean, very optimistically, is like, who's stopping you? Julia explains that Sean's always working and he has no idea what it takes to raise a child. Julia doesn't think she can do it again. Sean tells Julia that he'll stay home. He'll take off as much time as they need. Julia gets all smiley and tells Sean not to say it if he doesn't mean it. Sean says he has no intention of missing out this time around. Julia does seem genuinely excited about the baby when it seems like Sean's going to stay home to help take care of it. Sean and Julia start making out on their bed. I have to say, seeing Sean and Julia happy is incredibly refreshing. I'm literally just sitting watching like, that's nice. Good for them. We're back with Christian and he's at a bar again. A lady sits down and starts chatting to Christian about scotch. It also feels kind of important to note that looks-wise, she does kind of give off a Julia vibe. After a moment, she says, you don't remember, do you? She gives Christian her name, Shelley Edwards, and refreshes his memory that she came into his office a few years ago, and there was an exchange of sex for plastic surgery. They were having a good time until Shelley asked Christian if he had feelings for her. Christian lists off the procedures he did and then apologizes for not recognizing her. Shelley asks if he could freshen her up. Same arrangement? Christian declines and then tries to leave. Much to Christian's mounting horror, Shelley offers up her 17-year-old daughter. He can have both of them. 2 for 1. It's really awful, and Christian leaves the bar looking like he's going to be sick. We move straight from there into the Sexaholics Anonymous meeting, and we are about to be introduced to one of my favorite characters in the entire series. The meeting is being led by Gina Russo, played beyond brilliantly by Jessalyn Gilsig. I just love her so much. I'm going to try to rein it in and continue with the recap. We pan across the room and see Christian standing in the back. Christian's going to leave. Gina, by the exit at this point, tells him that she left halfway through her first meeting too. Then she went out and got laid. Christian says he was considering that, but that he has surgery in the morning. Gina knows how that line must play with women. Christian says it is also frequently the truth. Gina knows how it must go. Girl meets plastic surgeon, surgeon bangs girl, surgeon has great excuse to leave before dawn. Christian corrects that they go to his place and he gives them cat fare. Gina's like, oh, a gentleman, nice. She wants to know how many women he slept with in the past year. A gentleman never tells. Gina tries again. This month? Christian offers to count the notches on his bedpost. Then she asks, this week? She continues, I bet you're searching for that special someone, the one who's hotter and smarter and better than the one you're with. Just as an aside, we'll get a similar moment with Kimber in a future episode, and I love how many women on this show just immediately have Christian's number. Gina explains that since she started working the program, she doesn't go home with anyone who reinforces her low self-image, and she doesn't blow anyone off just because he has the bad taste to actually like her. She's gone 8 months without a one-nighter. Gina gives Christian her number with an offer to become his sponsor. They part ways, and Christian immediately calls Gina from the hallway to invite her for a drink. It is pretty cute. Cut to post-hookup, and Christian's taking a shower. His bathroom shares a glass wall with his bedroom, so we can see both Christian and a spiraling Gina. Gina's freaking out about sleeping with a plastic surgeon. She must have wanted him to catalog her flaws. This prompts Christian to be shitty about Gina's body. Gina's upset that after 8 months of meetings, she'd finally got her life under control. Christian laughs at that. Under whose control? The anonymous sex-crazed sycophants who meet once a week to groupthink their way out of desperation? Gina doesn't expect Christian to understand. How can he believe in a higher power when he already thinks he's God? Christian tries to offer Gina cab fare. Jessalyn Gilsig makes the best face and is in disbelief that he's throwing her out. Christian points out that he does actually have surgery in 4 hours, and that if he doesn't get some sleep, he could wind up scarring someone for life. Gina argues that she'll be scarred for life if she has to go, and refuses to leave because she has too much self-respect for that. She then goes about getting comfier in the bed. Christian's had enough and physically drags Gina out of the bed, which is awful, but he does tell her that it's time to 12-step her way on out of there, which is kind of funny. Gina calls Christian a narcissistic bastard. The next bit is one of the, I'm sure, many, many moments we will encounter that plays completely differently now, and I'm just going to quote Christian in full. Hey, you want the wisdom to know the difference between what you can and can't change? Here's step 13. Everything disappears. Love, trees, rocks, steel, plastic, human beings. None of us get out alive. Now you can huddle in a group and face it one day at a time, or you can be grateful that when your body rubs against somebody else's, it explodes with enough pleasure to make you forget, even for a minute, that you're only a walking pile of ashes. Now that is the truth. If you're strong, it'll make you free. If you're weak, it'll make you you. Gina's been watching Christian with an increasingly dreamy look in her eyes. When he's finished, she asks if he still has her number. After this, we get a bit of a lighter moment. Christian's putting golf balls into a glass in his office when Sean pops in. Sean tells Christian that the work he did on a cleft palate didn't suck, and Christian responds, flatterer. Given how the characters on the show usually treat each other, it's such a lovely reprieve when they're playful. Sean also tells Christian that he and Julia have decided to keep the baby. Christian doesn't seem terribly enthusiastic, but he does offer his congratulations. Sean tells Christian that he's going to take some time off for paternity leave. Christian's face falls at this. Sean's going to take at least 3 months. Now I'm going to give Sean the benefit of the doubt that at least is carrying a lot of weight here, but it's kind of hilarious that in the scene with Julia, Sean insists that he'll stay home because he doesn't want to miss anything, and his idea of that is about 3 months. Now, I don't have a baby, but I've been around enough of them to say with reasonable confidence that a baby is not entirely self-sufficient at 3 months. A bold claim, I know. Sean says that they'll hire someone to take his place in the office. Christian points out that finding another plastic surgeon isn't exactly like hiring an office temp. Sean stands firm. He apologizes for the inconvenience and tells Christian that he'd love to feel that Christian's behind what Sean's doing, but even if he's not, Sean's doing it anyway. Sean leaves, and Christian goes back to putting golf balls, except now he's off his game, and he misses a shot. In the next scene, Christian and Liz are working on Ellie Collins, but there's something amiss. Liz can't intubate properly at first, and when Christian begins the surgery, things don't look like they should. After they're done, Christian storms out of the OR to confront Grace. They hired her to weed out the sickos, Christian's words, but when the big one came along, she missed it, just like everyone else. Ellie Collins was never in an accident. From there, we're in a doctor's office, and Julia is having an ultrasound. There's an issue with the pregnancy. Poor Julia is like, incompetent cervix, that fits. The doctor says it's not something to be too alarmed about. He just needs to place a stitch around the cervix. Also, it does feel somewhat important to note that Sean is the type of person who refers to the pregnancy in we terms. We could miscarry, for example. The main bit of this scene is that Julia will have to go on bed rest for 7 months. She'll only be allowed bathroom privileges, to sit up for meals, and showers every few days. Sean's fully on board, but Julia is understandably struggling with this. She doesn't think she can stay in bed for 7 months. The doctor responds that you'd be amazed at what you can do if you want something bad enough. From here, we're back at home with Sean and Julia, and he's setting up Bed Rest Central in their living room. Judge Mathis is playing on the TV, and Sean is making sure that Julia is well equipped with takeout menus and catalogs. Julia's shocked that Sean's encouraging her to shop. Sean jokes he's not an idiot. He knows Julia never buys clothes when she puts on weight. Smooth, Sean. Real smooth. Sean's pièce de résistance is a Game Boy. He tells Julia that the bed rest chat room says it's the best thing for boredom. The idea of Sean hanging out in the bed rest chat rooms is pretty adorable. After Sean leaves, Matt brings in a tray with takeout. I just have to take another second and say, what happens to season 1 Matt? He's so thoughtful. Matt spots the Game Boy and says that when he asked for one of those, Dad said no. Matt got a whole lecture about how he was only using 1/10 of his brain. Julia uses the classic, a brain is a terrible thing to waste. Matt asks, what about her brain? Julia responds, a son's brain. A wife's is apparently just excess baggage. Matt can't believe Julia's doing this again. A puzzled Julia asks what? Matt responds, having a baby you don't want. This gets Julia to put down her soup and ask Matt what he means. Matt answers that maybe, if she hadn't gotten pregnant with him, she'd be a doctor right now. Julia makes it clear that she's never regretted having Matt nanny, and there's not a degree in the whole world that would make her half as proud. Eventually, Matt asks Julia if she even wants another kid, or is she just glad to have a reason why she can't go after what she really wants. We leave Julia thinking about that and head back to McNamara Troy. Christian and Grace are talking to Ellie post-surgery. Christian mentions that there was almost nothing left of her nose to work on. They want to talk to Ellie before her husband Dave comes back, because they think he's been abusing her, and she just said it was an accident to protect him. Of course, this is right when Dave arrives. He figures out what's going on and asks if Ellie told them he was abusing her. Christian says that she didn't have to. The inside of her face looks like a patch quilt. Grace straight up asks Dave if he broke Ellie's nose, and he admits that he did. Grace is talking about filing a report when Ellie interrupts that she made him do it. Literally forced him to do it. She hated her nose and had so many surgeries that other surgeons refused to perform anymore. She begged her husband to break it and to tell the doctors it was an accident. He didn't want to, but she swore that after this there'd be no more surgeries. He loves Ellie. Watching her suffer, hating herself in that way, he couldn't stand it. He had to do something to stop the pain. They want to know if Christian and Grace are going to report them, but we don't get an answer. Then we're with Julia, who's up and about back at school because, as she tells Jude, who was thrilled to see her, he thought he was going to die without her, she didn't want to miss the midterm. They flirt a little, but pretty quickly Julia's not feeling well, and she asks Jude to drive her to the hospital. We move ahead to that night, and Grace is waiting for someone in a bar when Christian strolls in. Christian says the guy must have balls for leaving her waiting. Major league balls, Grace confirms. Christian offers to buy her a drink. Grace says, that would be pointless, Dr. Troy, because you're the reason I'm drinking. He asks Grace to call him Christian. Grace is a little exasperated. Haven't we seen enough of each other for one day? She tells Christian to go away. Christian tells Grace that he blamed her for what happened with Ellie because he couldn't take responsibility for his own actions. He was an asshole, and he's sorry. Grace jokes that Christian apologizing is like a UFO sighting. It happened clear as day, but no one will believe it. Christian's playful. He says it's all in the delivery. Christian wants to know if Grace believes that crap from Ellie's husband, about him loving her so much he had to stop her pain. Grace believes that he believes it. Grace admits that Ellie and Dave have a connection. They show each other the darkest parts of themselves, without fear the other will run screaming for the hills. Christian, because they're both psycho. Grace laughs. I guess. Still, it's a kind of sharing most people won't experience in a lifetime. Christian's felt pretty genuine up to this point, but just my opinion, this feels like the part of the scene where he starts pulling out his seduction moves. He sighs. It gets old, doesn't it? Looking for that person. Grace agrees that it gets absolutely exhausting. We all know where this is going. We're back in Christian's bedroom for the second time this episode. This bit is shot kind of weirdly. It's mainly focused on Christian's back, obscuring the woman's face, as though trying to preserve the mystery of who he's sleeping with. It is, of course, Grace, who, as soon as they're finished, looks like she regrets her decision immediately. She slips out of bed, gets dressed, and leaves without a word. It's the complete opposite of the scene with Gina. She leaves Christian alone and looking like he doesn't know how to process this at all. It really does make almost no sense from Grace's POV for her to have sex with Christian. They're both hot, but that's basically it. In all of their previous scenes, she never seems exasperated by Christian in like an, oh, you sexy rogue way. She always seems genuinely annoyed by him. That same night, Sean and Julia arrive home from the hospital. Julia flops onto the couch. Sean sees the Game Boy and says he'll notify the bed rest chat room to take it off their anti-boredom list. Julia says it really was very sweet. Sean tells her Ronald will be disappointed. He's the guy Sean was interviewing to take over while he was on paternity leave. Julia can't believe he was really considering that. Sean starts to get annoyed. Yes, Julia, I was really considering that. I was actually putting you ahead of my career. I know, you've been doing it for the past 16 years. It's not what it's cracked up to be. You made that pretty clear. Julia wants to know if Sean thinks she took the midterm hoping she'd miscarry. She tells Sean he's not the only one who lost a baby. Sean says that he's the only one who wanted one. Real dick move, Sean. Sean's hurt that Julia didn't even call him to take her to the hospital. The truth is, Julia, you didn't love me, us, enough to even try. It was too much of a sacrifice. Just as an aside here, it's not like we're talking about Julia facing like a couple of months on bed rest, which would be difficult enough. We're talking about 7 months. Just objectively, that is an incredibly long time to basically only be allowed to get up to use the bathroom. Julia doesn't know where they're going, but if Sean thinks they can make all of their real problems go away by having a child, maybe they are better off. Sean's getting emotional. Are you saying you're relieved? Julia replies, aren't you? Just a little? Or is it easier to live in denial and vilify me? Jolie Richardson rules so hard in this scene. In the middle of this, Sean gets a call. It's from Lee Moriarty. She's calling from her engagement party. Unfortunately, we do see Kurt post-surgery, and yes, it is spectacularly bad. Sean offers his congratulations and says that he's glad her mother was convinced. Lee tells him that she didn't buy it for a minute, but she could see that any guy who was willing to change his face to please his mother-in-law, that man must really love her daughter. Lee wants to invite Sean to the wedding. As the scene wraps up, just to look back on the storyline as a whole, it is, of course, incredibly bad and deeply inappropriate, but I feel like the one slight saving grace is that the surgery does not convince Lee's mom at all. The episode closes out with Sean thinking about the lengths people will and won't go for love. That's it for the recap, and I'm not going to have any aftercare segments this week. It just felt a bit too lighthearted. Even keeping to the recap style that I did for the first 4 episodes felt incredibly weird. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking with me. If you're interested, you can follow the podcast on Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at Tell Me What You Don't Like Pod. It's at Tell Me Pod on Blue Sky, where you can keep an eye out for episode updates, behind the scenes content, and more. I'm still working out how the podcast's social media channel should look right now. It's not exactly the time for silly YouTube shorts. Got thoughts, theories, or just want someone to chat to about Christian Troy? Email me at tellmewhatyoudon'tlikepod@gmail.com.